Connect. Community. Experience.
Thought that we were playing one-on-one. Now I see you're playing with the team. All this time, thought that you were laying up and turning over was your thing. No, I won't stay down. I'm gonna rebound. It's a crying shame. You ain't in the game. Gotta play some D. Gave you my MVP. You took a foul shot. You need a timeout. Shake it off. Shake.
Hey Jordan, what is the topic of today? I am a lesbian, and my preferred pronouns are also she and her.
Being bi. I would define bisexuality as being attracted to both your gender and other genders.
I guess it would be hard to define for everybody when you're just one person.
We're often seen as not gay enough for the LGBT community and also not straight enough for the straight communities.
How did you know that you were bi?
In high school, my friend was like, I think I like you, and then I was like, oh, that's interesting, I think I might like you too, and then we dated.
Is it a woman?
And yeah, then my friend was a woman, yeah. Or a young girl at the time.
I guess, yeah.
Then I dated some guys, and then I dated some girls, and I was just kind of like, hey, this is pretty cool, I'll just keep doing this thing. How did you know that you were a lesbian?
I was like in a car with my mom, and I was thinking to myself, what if I was gay?
Visibility in the community, meaningful legitimacy. Being a gay person means understanding that gay people are just as diverse as heterosexuals.
Hey, and then all of a sudden, as soon as I had that thought, there was like a cold like chill, and then that just was like, what? You have a boyfriend right now.
I currently have a boyfriend, yes. A lot of people kind of just assume I'm straight. Well, like if you marry a guy, are you still bi?
What?
Being a bisexual woman in a heterosexual relationship kind of makes me not gay enough.
Like if someone tells you who they are,
Believe them. Yeah.
right? As a bisexual woman, how do you use the word gay, and how does it feel comfortable to use the word gay?
I think I'm fully comfortable like using it to describe myself.
Now, let's go to the next clip. Hi, thank you again for joining us again at Less Stress Matters. We're continuing on with our episode. Welcome back to Less Stress Matters. In this episode, we'll be dealing with LGBTTQQIAAP community.
Transgender is an umbrella term that includes people whose gender identity or gender expression does not match their assigned birth sex. This includes people who are transvestites, drag, and cross-dress, as well as transsexuals. Transgender is not a sexual orientation. A transsexual is someone whose gender identity doesn't match their assigned sex, someone who was born in the wrong body, in a sense. Personally, I am a male to female transsexual. I was born a male but identify as a female and needed to transition so my body was congruent with my Transvestites and drag queens and kings are people who cross-dress as the opposite gender. A drag queen would be a male who cross-dresses as a female. A drag king would be a female who cross-dresses as a male. They could be straight, gay, bi, or any other sexual orientation.
Identify with anything, but if anything, I guess it would be butch.
MOC, which is like masculine of center.
Kind of genderqueer, butch, mahu.
Gender neutral.
And I'm gender neutral.
LHB, long hair, butch. I haven't always felt butch, but I've always felt like I identified more with being more masculine than feminine.
I see butch almost like an extreme side of the spectrum, and I see myself falling more towards the middle.
I think society is actually just taking all those words and kind of just throwing them away now and creating a whole new world, and I'm sure they'll put a word to everything that everyone's becoming.
There's a lot of different types of butches, and I identify more with like the butch queen aspect.
Sometimes I'm not male or female, I'm like, I don't know where that came out of, I don't know what that is, but yeah, that's me right there. I believe that masculinity goes beyond aesthetics.
They like to associate that with gender, but I feel like each gender has a little bit of both.
Gender in general can be inherent, but also a performance, and that your full identity can be some combination of how you feel inside and what you like to see when you look in the mirror.
Femme sometimes can also have like masculinity.
There's tons of parts of you. I feel like your mind can be more masculine sometimes, your emotions can be more masculine sometimes.
I think it's just becoming so much more fluid than it ever has been before.
Female masculinity has this whole background of growing up a certain way and having to be put in situations where a lot of men haven't had to go through.
There's a certain female sensibility tucked back in between the D cups.
They're both a performance of gender, but I consider female masculinity to be sort of like a rebellion.
Now that I present as more masculine, if I see another woman walking around at night, I'll consciously think about how they are seeing me and present myself as less threatening.
It's personifying like all the best parts of masculinity, but like leaving out like all the worst misogynistic aspects.
Straight girls are intrigued. Straight men are sometimes intimidated, sometimes eager to create some sort of bromance with me.
Clothing, loose there, but then loose there, or tight there and then too tight there.
Not dressing the way anyone would expect me to dress like in a meeting. I don't wear heels, don't have long hair.
I think the advantage comes from your self-confidence in general.
I don't get catcalled by straight men walking down the street. There's an advantage inherent in just being who I am.
I feel like if you're happy and you're not hurting anybody, then what's wrong with what you're wearing? Like, I'm not wearing anything that's like hating towards somebody else or another community. I'm just feeling more comfortable in my skin.
I just dress the way I dress and I look the way I do because it makes me feel comfortable.
I feel pressured to act flat-chested.
Not anymore. Once you get older, you start being like, I don't give a f, this is me.
When someone puts a label on me or when I'm labeling myself, even when I said gender neutral, I feel like I'm constantly watching myself and what I do and if I'm doing it the right way.
I felt like I had to be more chivalrous.
A lot of times butch women are blessed with the burden of boobs. That's a very funny, like, cross to bear on top of everything else.
I got top surgery 2 years ago, and before that, I was miserable to be around because I was always so insecure. I would be at the pool parties at the Standard wearing like a thick-ass hoodie in 100-degree weather because I didn't want nobody to see my body, sweating to death because I wasn't happy. And now I'm like, I'm happy.
Cross-dressers. Now let's go to the next clip.
Generally, these people will not transition and live full-time as the gender they are cross-dressing as. That is the difference between comparing transvestites, drag, and cross-dressers to transsexuals. Transsexuals are those that need to transition and could take hormones and have surgeries to accomplish this. They generally seek to live full-time.
Ever wonder how female to male gender reassignment surgery works? This surgery animation demonstrates the process. The procedure typically occurs in stages. Here's how it's done. During a double mastectomy, both breasts are removed. The uterus and the fallopian tubes are also removed. Genital transformation procedures are the next stage. The urethra is rerouted to allow urination through the phallus. The labia majora forms the scrotum. During the scrotoplasty, synthetic testicles are implanted. A radial forearm flap or a alternative portion of of skin is used for penile reconstruction. Finally, hormones alter the amount of testosterone in a person's body. An estimated 100 to 500 people in the United States undergo sex reassignment operation each year.
Transvestites, drag, and crossdressers will not want to live full-time and transition, but they may get some surgeries or even take hormones to accomplish what they are going for. Regarding terms for transgender individuals that I find offensive, ones that I've been called are tranny, she-male, he-she, ladyboy. All those are just offensive terms, among many others, I'm sure. Also, using terms like transgendered or transgenders, like that person is transgendered, or they are transgenders, or that person is a transgender. No, that doesn't really fit. It should be a transgender person or transgender people. Alternatively, if they are a transsexual, they could be called a transsexual. That, I don't really feel needs to have person after it. Like, that person is a transsexual. That is fine in my eyes. But in the end, these are just terms, and you shouldn't put labels on yourself. Be yourself and express yourself however you wish, and ignore all the people telling you it's wrong or that you are mentally ill, that they don't know anything about what it's like for transgender individuals. The struggle of not fitting in and transitioning.
Your love takes me higher.
Got a bad vibe. One of these days, I will be alive. No, for real, I feel I might just go down deep in that nerd hole. It's not my fault. I ain't about to commit suicide. I just got this really unsettling vibe in the corner. Yo, I got I'm at what about the 8-ball corner pocket, watch me get it in like. Trying to tell you I'm the best around. Don't stop with me. I got ton of crowns. I go work for this occasion. Perfect.
There's a lot of misinformation out there about what it means to be transgender, but recently scientists have begun to look more closely into the neurology, physiology, and psychology behind it.
So today we're going to break down what science does know in a respectful and educational way. Hey guys, I'm Gigi Gorgeous, and today I'm here with ASAP Science to break down the science of being transgender. Before we get too deep into it, we have to look at your genetic sex, or the chromosomes you have. These were determined right at fertilization, when the sperm cell from your father, which carries an X or a Y chromosome, fused with the egg from your mother, which carries an X chromosome.
But until 6 or 7 weeks after fertilization, both XY and XX embryos have identical gonads. Around 7 weeks, the male sex organs start to develop because of a gene on the Y chromosome called SRY. It causes cells to become more specialized, and these cells create testosterone, which in turn triggers the development of structures like the penis and scrotum, while other cells block female development by degenerating the female ducts. However, in female development, because there is no Y chromosome with the SRY gene, these ducts stay intact and become the uterus, cervix, upper vagina, and the oviduct with the help of estrogen and chemicals secreted by the early kidney. But it's not always that simple. There are sometimes even rare combinations like XXY, XXX, XXYY, etc., and even people with XX chromosomes that develop male genitals and characteristics due to a piece of the Y chromosome breaking off and switching places to an X chromosome.
But sexual differentiation in the brain actually happens much later than gonadal differentiation. And yes, although controversial, male and female brains have structural and functional differences between each other. Studies have found that males generally have a larger cerebrum, cerebellum, and hippocampus, while females have higher density left frontal lobes and larger volumes in the right frontal lobes. So what exactly do we see when we look at the brain of a transgender person? Several studies have shown that transgender brains are both structurally and functionally more similar to their experienced gender identity than their biological sex.
One study found that trans women who, despite being assigned male at birth, had a smaller female-sized structure in the hypothalamus. MRI scans also show the brain structures of trans people to be more similar in thickness to their experienced gender and not their sex. Finally, the pheromone androstenedione causes different hypothalamic responses in male and female brains. And when individuals with gender dysphoria were exposed to it, the hypothalamic response matched their perceived gender rather than their sex. These studies help to highlight how masculinization or feminization of the gonads is not always the same as the brain, and that there's a difference between your sex or your anatomy and your gender or how we perceive our own bodies. There also seems to be a genetic component to transgender identity. Looking at family histories, gender identity incongruence seems to run in the family, meaning they may be inherited. The CYP17 gene, which controls the body's level of sex hormones, has a changed allele that is expressed frequently in trans men. Although more research could be done, scientists are currently looking at over 3 million DNA markers for transgender identity to investigate any genetic link for being trans.
Even though scientific studies validate the experience of transgender people, they're still suffering from more depression and anxiety than the general public. The risk of suicide is more prominent in transgender people who have been rejected by their family, discriminated in the workplace, or in healthcare. Suicide risks seem to decrease after gender transitioning, suggesting that gender dysphoria can cause an extreme amount of emotional pain, even to the point of suicide. If you, a family member, or a friend is suffering from gender dysphoria, there are a few links in the description for more information.
Thank you so much, Gigi, for being part of this video.
We here at Less Stress Matters. Please contact us at morrismorris910@yahoo.com. You can also see episodes on YouTube. Less Stress Matters. Now, let's go to the next clip.
Your love takes me higher. I don't wanna zoom out. I wanna keep it in perspective. Your love feels like fire. I don't wanna burn out. I gotta keep it cool, collected. It seems like every time we touch, the sensation's just too much, and I fall into this hole with you. And by the time I'm coming to, you do that little thing you do, and I lose my self-control.
Initially, I said 1 in 2,000 people are born intersex, but it's 1 in 200.
Yes.
And then how did you correct me? What did you say?
I said that intersex people are about 1.7% of the population, which is the same statistics as redheads, naturally born redheads.
That's so crazy. So let's just, for those that might not know what the term means, what is intersex?
So intersex describes people whose biology doesn't fit the typical definition of male or female, and that's an umbrella term to describe all sorts of different variations and traits and sex characteristics.
So what makes you intersex?
So for me particularly, I have XY chromosomes and internal testes. So I usually say it takes a lot of balls to talk about this stuff. And because internally I have testes and XY chromosomes, no uterus, no period, no ovaries, that sort of thing.
And just to clarify, women usually have XX, right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Usually, typically, women have XX chromosomes, men have XY chromosomes, but there's a whole variety of possibilities. Those aren't your only options for chromosomes. You can have XO chromosomes or XXY or XXXY. There's so many variations, but people only ever talk about XX or XY, but people can have all sorts of different chromosomes.
Okay, so how old were you when you first found out you were intersex? I know that this can kind of be a controversial topic depending on how it happened for you, but are you okay talking about it? Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm open.
Open book, love that.
Yeah, open book. I was 10 when I found out I was intersex, so I went to the gynecologist, which, as a lot of people who've been to a gynecologist know, it's not fun at any age.
But you went at 10?
At 10,
That's so young, to be perfectly honest.
Oh, no, and we knew, my mom took me because she knew I might be intersex, actually.
Oh,
so
okay.
She took me, and intersex for me actually runs in my family. It's hereditary.
Wow.
So I have about 2 or 3 intersex aunts and cousins, and so my mom knew it's possible. So
Okay,
that's why
wait.
she took me
So
in.
then this is I love this because So when you were born, did the doctors mention anything to your parents? No. Did they purposefully do that? Or do you think that they had to be aware?
No, I don't think they knew.
Really?
Yeah, so for my variation, usually people don't find out until they are usually trying to get their period or not getting their period or not going through a typical puberty. So for me, that's why I went when I was 10, because my mom didn't want me to have all these expectations that I would be getting my period and, going through all the same sort of period or puberty like milestones that my friends were going through. So she took me in so that I had like the right expectations for my body.
Wow. That was smart of her, obviously.
Yeah, exactly.
So then when you found out, how did that affect you maybe emotionally or mentally? If at all.
Originally, like right in the moment when I found out, it wasn't too hard. I think when I talk to people about this, kids are very open to all sorts of variations and differences if you just kind of tell it to them point blank and kind of tell them the facts. It's not a big deal. I think what later was hard and emotional for me is dealing with society's expectations of me and society's ideas of being a woman or sex and gender, and that's what really started to cause problems. So originally I found out that I had XY chromosomes, but I didn't know that usually meant boy chromosomes. So 2 years later, in my 7th grade year, I found out that boys have XY chromosomes, and I came home crying and yelling at my mom, like, "You never told me I was a boy," and like freaking out. And that was like, I feel like that was really a big defining moment for me. And then it was hard for me and my mom because we didn't have the same trust anymore. For me, there was always a fear of people finding out. And I think both my doctors and my parents had told me not to talk about it. And for them, it was a fear of me getting bullied. And it was out of love that they told me not to talk about it because they didn't want me to, they didn't want me to be bullied or to be ashamed of it. But the secrecy ended up causing a lot of shame, and it caused a lot of like stigma in myself. And I really, I was scared people would find out. And so whenever someone asked me for a tampon, for instance, in middle school or high school, I was always like, no. And it's a fine thing to say no, but like for me, I was like, no, and please don't find out that I like don't have a period. And like it has all of these internal mental things that start going on.
Like I'm saying no because I don't need them, not I'm saying no because I just don't have one.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, wow, that's so much to think about, especially when you're growing up and you have so many other things on top of that, like wanting to feel cool or like making sure you have your grades on, on point. And then this on top of it is just another factor. So did you ever struggle with self-confidence growing up?
No, of course not.
You're like, come on now.
No.
But what did you do to, it takes, no pun intended, but it takes a lot of balls to like get on the internet and say this stuff, So then how did you find the confidence in yourself and reassurance in yourself to just lay it all out there?
So I actually knew I was going to be doing this when I was like 12. That was the first time I knew I wanted to be talking about this. And it was not so much that I wanted to talk about it, but I was doing so much research online and nobody was talking about it positively. And it didn't seem right that this way that I was born, that who I was bad or wrong or shouldn't be talked about in a positive way. And so I knew then, I was like, if by the time I'm ready, whenever that is, it was just kind of something like in my head, I knew that I would talk about it so that we could change the narrative so that people would be talking about it in a positive way. But what took that is me meeting other intersex people. When I was 22 was the first time I met other intersex people. And it was just realizing that we've all gone through these same experiences, that we've all dealt with the same shame and the same stigma and the same awful medical interventions. That was really, once I realized that, it was like I had to do something. It wasn't so much that I had the confidence anymore, that it was just that I was in a place to make a change and make a difference, and I wanted that to happen, I guess.
How did you meet them? Did you get online? Okay.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, I went to a support group, AAS DSD support group here in the U.S., and there's really only one intersex support group in the U.S., and we only meet once a year. But just kind of meeting others was just so empowering, and for the first time I was talking in a circle with a bunch of girls that we were talking about how, like, how we don't understand periods and we don't get that, and it's kind of like a weird thing. It's not a weird thing, but a weird thing that we didn't understand.
Yeah.
And so that sort of just kind of empowering like sense of finally meeting people who've been through what you've been through was really awesome. And I didn't want anybody else to have to be going through all the same shame and stigma and horrible treatment that we went through as kids. So
I think that's a great takeaway, Emily, because getting online can help support, save, guide you, especially if you're feeling alone. So if you feel like you don't have anyone to talk to in real life, going online can be a really great way to meet other people who are like-minded, who might be going through the same exact thing as you. Okay, so then my question for you is, do you identify as LGBTQ?
I identify as LGBTQIA+.
Okay.
The I is usually followed after the Q, and that means intersex. And we often talk about the I doesn't stand for invisible. So I definitely identify with that. And I definitely identify as queer just because feel like my experiences and relationships and just kind of being who I am that's a good umbrella term that kind of covers it, because people don't really understand a lot of this narrative or these conversations. So it's just kind of an easy like catch-all to be like, yep, like done. Like I don't have to worry about this. Like it's good. So that's the hard part when you come out as LGBTQ. People understand it to a certain degree. They at least have heard of it, whatever it is you're coming out as. But when you come out as intersex, it's always a much bigger conversation. And I have this business card that says, ask me about being intersex, and then in small print, but only if you have 10 minutes to spare. And it's that sort of thing, like you have to have a lot of time to have these conversations and talk about it. I think people often get fixated on genitals and what that looks like. And even on YouTube, I get those sort of questions all the time, like, oh, what does it look like, or what does she look like, that sort of thing. And it's not about genitals. The fact that people think that it's different is like, we're all different. And like the fact that people think that we could all have the same exact looking genitals, but that we all have very different noses or very different ears or whatever it is, like that makes no sense to me.
Oh, hi! In all seriousness, pansexuality just means that you experience attraction regardless of gender or sex. Pansexuality is sometimes described as being gender blind. You're a woman? Nice. You're a man? Great. Penises? Bring it out. Non-binary? Sweet. Boobs? Those are awesome. Can we cuddle now? Gender identity, gender expression, penises, vaginas, anything in between. It's not really a factor in my experience of attraction to people. So you're not attracted to pants, but you're attracted to everyone. No video alter ego pretending to be people. I'm not attracted to everyone. That would be very exhausting. I'm still concerned with someone's values, what kind of person they are, what they're doing with their life, how sexy I find them. It's just that their genitals and gender identity and gender expression have nothing to do with those things for me. So it's pretty straightforward, right? Where things start to get a little murkier is when we talk about the difference between pansexuality and bisexuality. The good news is that we define labels. Labels do not define us. Think on that one and your head will start going around everywhere. And you'll eventually be like, oh yeah, labels are just words to describe things that we feel. In a general sense, pan means all, attraction to all genders and sexes. Bi means two, attraction to two genders or two sexes. I think that's the simplest way to sum it up. Make of that what you will. When it comes to things like sexual preference, it's important that each individual has the power to decide what that's going to mean for them specifically. I do get a lot of email from people asking, so am I bi or am I pan? And I have a secret for you. You get to decide. That question isn't for me or anyone else to tell you. Here's what I would do about this dilemma. And by the way, this doesn't just apply to the bi and pan thing. Take some time. I'm talking a long ass time. This could be several weeks. This could be several years. To think about your sexual preferences, to think about your experiences with attraction, think about what you like, what you want. And as you're thinking real hard, philosophizing, finding yourself, keep in the back of your mind those general definitions. And when the time comes that you need a label to describe all of those thoughts that you have, pick the one that you think most accurately describes you and feels comfortable to use. Because sexual preference is so varied amongst people, the chances of any label 100% describing you, pretty low. All right, y'all, I gotta bounce. There are people that are gonna be walking in here any minute, and I don't have any pants on. Although I guess that's their problem, not mine. All right, y'all, I'll see you next week. Don't forget to add me on Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter. I love that shit, even more than pants.